If you want Unity 3D, CryEngine, or Unreal Engine tutorials, like, comment, or subscribe for more. We are going to begin this series by creating a third-person view camera that we can modify to be in any position we want in relation to the character and then implement basic movement in CryEngine. Now I do apologize, but due to how code is written in CryEngine, this will have to be broken down into several episodes with the amount of code and explanation behind what's going on. However, since this will have to be in multiple videos, we can start with all the code we are going to need and then add the models and attach the scripts later on. To start off, let me give a brief overview of all the classes and XML files we will need to create. We will need a player class, player view class, and camera view class in C#. The XML files we will need to create are default profile, action maps, and profile. Now there is a very specific organizational structure we need to follow, and as we reach those points, I will point those out as we come across them. With that being said, let's sit back, relax, and start our No Man's Sky multi-tool implementation in CryEngine episode. To start things off, we need to create a brand new C# project, and I am going to use the blank template. The reason for this is because I want to build everything from scratch, as so we can understand everything that is going on without any guesswork. I will call this project NMS. Navigate to the folder that you have saved your project to. Mine is saved in my D drive. Locate the game.cry project file and right-click on it. Locate the option to generate solution and left-click on it. Once the batch file finishes, you can now navigate to the code folder and see that there is an SLN file. Since I am using Visual Studio 2017, CryEngine has not fixed the slight issue with it quite yet, so we need to click on the game folder and modify the game.csproj file. Right-click on it and change the project type GUIDs. We will do this by removing the first half. The link to the CryEngine documentation on this, if I move too quickly, is in the description below. Now we can open the SLN file and get to work. In Visual Studio, create a folder called Entity Components and then a folder inside of that one called Camera. Now we will add a CS file called View Camera. Now, if any of the code I write confuses you, don't worry. At the end, I will explain in great detail on a few of the portions that I think may confuse some people at the end of the video. We will change the namespace to be CryEngine.game. Make the view camera class to be public and remove all of the unnecessary using statements. The next step is to make the view camera class inherit from entity component. Following this, we will add the entity component attribute with the category named camera. We will create a static constructor of the view camera class with the public getter and private setter. We follow this up by creating a private view and boolean called _view and _active respectively. We create an entity property attribute with the entity property type set to primitive, and write the string value to be checks if this is the only active camera. Directly under this, we write a public bool active. In the getter section, we return the private value of _active. In the setter, we write an if statement to check the value, and then another if statement to check if the active camera is not equal to null. Inside of that if statement, we check the active camera active to be false and the active camera view set active to be false. Now we set the _active to be true. Underneath that, we write another if statement to check if the _view is equal to null. And inside of that if statement, we write _view is set to view.create. Under that, we set the _view.setActive to be true. and then write active camera is set to this. Now we need to write an else statement. We write an if statement for the active camera is equal to this. Inside of that if statement, we write active camera is set to null. Under the if statement, we set underscore active to false. Now we create one more if statement and check if the underscore view is not equal to null. Inside of it, we write underscore view set active is false. We have finished that long Boolean method for active. Now we can move on to our next method. Write protected override void onInitialized. Inside of this method, we write base.onInitialized if the underscore view is null. Inside of that if statement, write underscore view is set to view.create. Underneath that if statement, we write underscore view dot link to entity. Now we can create the next if statement. If underscore active or active camera is null, inside we write active is set to true. The next method is protected override void onRemove. Again, we write base.onRemove. We create an if statement. If underscore view is not null. Inside of that if statement, active is set to false. Underscore view.remove view. Underscore view is set to null. Our next method is our update method. Protected override void onUpdate. Write base.onUpdate and the parameters are frame time. We also need to set the parameters of the onUpdate method to be float frame time. We have another if statement to write. If underscore active, inside of it we write underscore view.update and the parameters are frame time, comma, underscore active. The next method to create is link camera. Write public void link camera with the parameters of entity, comma, bool, reset position is set to false. Entity.parent is set to entity. We create an if statement for reset position and inside of the if statement we write entity.position is set to vector3.0. The last method we need to create is our unlink camera method. Write public void unlink camera. Inside of this method, we write entity.parent is set to null. Whew, that was a healthy chunk of code, wasn't it? So now we can save the script and call it complete, but we aren't done yet. I know there are a few lines of code here that are somewhat confusing for beginners, so I think I should go over them. For those of you that decide to leave the video at this point, I bid you adieu, and hope to see you next time. For those of you that want to stay and understand a bit more of what's happening, let's get started. We started with inheriting from entity component. Entity component is a component that can be attached to an entity or game object at runtime and automatically exposes itself to schematic. The attribute of entity component category equals camera. This allows us to see this inside of the CryEngine sandbox and display the name inside of CryEngine's entity system and the sandbox editor. The View class is a class that enables us to activate or deactivate and modify the camera. Entity property type primitive is another attribute that is very useful. This attribute allows us to mark properties that will be available in the sandbox editor. Primitive is one of the few types that are available to us. Primitive marks it to be a default type such as numeric and string values. Now I want to point out that if you look closely at the code we wrote for the public bool active, that it looks very similar to the singleton pattern. That is because this is what I would call a CryEngine singleton. It makes sure that there is only ever one active camera and view in the scene. View.create allows us to create a new view that can be used to modify the camera's properties. Link2 is a method that links this specific view to an entity. RemoveView is a method that removes this view from the game. I wanted to go a little bit more into the update method because I'm sure that it can be a bit on the confusing side for some. More specifically, the _view.update with the parameters of frametime, _active. This method will only call update when the view is actually active. What's more is that since the update will return immediately if the view is not active, we can save a managed to unmanaged call with it. Lastly, the unlinkCamera and linkCamera methods both have the usage of entity.parent in them. I want to go over what that was. This allows us to get or set the parent of the entity we want. In this case, it is the view. I should note that setting a new parent will keep the local transform or position of this object. With all of that being said, this is where we will end this episode. In the next episode, we will look into creating the player and player view portions of the code in order to have a working third-person view camera. I will also link the CryEngine C# API documentation in the description below if there are any other further clarifications you need for any of the methods I did not go over in detail. This has been Jessica the Rising Phoenix Dev, and I'm signing out.